I smoothed down my old, slightly faded flannel shirt and took a deep breath. My son Ben was beaming, his arm wrapped around his fiancée, Clara. "You ready, Dad?" he asked. I nodded, giving him a warm, slightly naive smile. "Ready as I'll ever be." We were meeting Clara's wealthy family for the first time at an expensive restaurant. Ben had wanted me to wear the suit he bought me, but I had a different plan. I needed to see their true colors. As we walked in, I saw them. Clara's mother, Evelyn, looked me up and down, her smile not reaching her eyes. Her father, Robert, gave a curt nod. The test had begun. The restaurant was all crystal and quiet chatter. I made sure to look around wide-eyed. "Wow, Ben," I said a little too loudly. "They got real cloth napkins." Evelyn's lips tightened. Robert gestured to the menu. "Order anything you like, David." I squinted at the prices. $10 for a bowl of soup. I can get a whole can for $1 at the market. Clara looked embarrassed. Ben squeezed my hand under the table, a silent signal. He was in on my little act. He knew why we were doing this. He had seen the doubts in Clara's eyes about her family's snobbery. The conversation turned to work. Robert leaned back. "I'm in private equity, mergers, acquisitions, that sort of thing. What about you, David?" I took a slow sip of water. "Oh, a bit of this and that. Fixed Mrs. Gable's fence last week. Did some odd jobs at the community center." I saw the glance between Evelyn and Robert. It was a look of pure dismissal. "How? Community-minded," Evelyn said. Clara was staring at her plate. Ben kicked my foot gently. We were seeing exactly what we feared. They judged a man's worth by his job title. Evelyn turned the topic to homes. "We're in the North Shore Estates, gated community, of course." She looked at me. "And where do you live, David?" I gave her my kindest, simplest smile. "I have a little place over on Elm Street. It's cozy. The roof leaks a bit when it rains hard, but I've got a bucket for it." Robert almost choked on his wine. "You own it?" he asked. "Oh yes," I said proudly. "Paid it off years ago." The rest of the dinner was a symphony of their condescension. They were sure Ben was marrying down. A week later, they invited us to their country club. Ben was nervous. "Dad, are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure, son," I said, pulling on a borrowed, ill-fitting polo shirt. At the club, Robert tried to explain golf. "This is a driver, David. You use it to tee off." I nodded seriously. "Looks like a fancy stick." Evelyn was showing off her friends. "David is Ben's father," she'd say, in a tone that implied an apology. I just smiled and shook hands, my grip purposely a little weak. They were putting on a show of tolerance, and I was playing my part perfectly. The wedding planning started. Evelyn took over. It had to be at the Grand Crest Hotel with a specific florist and a famous band. The cost was astronomical. Ben and Clara looked stressed. One evening, we all met to discuss the budget. "Some of us have to be practical with our money," Evelyn said, looking directly at me. "We can't all just throw cash around." I blinked. "Oh, I've saved up a little. I want to help." I pulled out a wrinkled envelope from my pocket. "I've got $500 right here." The room went silent. Evelyn looked horrified. "David," Robert said, trying to sound patient. "The deposit for the venue alone is $20,000. We appreciate the gesture, but let the adults handle this." Ben stood up, his face red. "He is an adult, and he's my father." Clara was crying quietly. I just sat there, holding my envelope, looking defeated. This was the tipping point. Their mask had slipped completely. They saw me as a charity case, a problem to be managed. They had no idea who they were really talking to. Later that night, Ben called me. "Clara is devastated. She knew they were snobs, but she didn't think they'd be so cruel to your face." "It's okay, son," I said, my voice calm. "Now we know for sure. The question is, what does Clara want?" There was a muffled conversation. Then Clara came on the line. Her voice was small. "I'm so sorry, David. I don't want this. I don't want them to ruin our day." I smiled. "Then they won't, my dear. Leave everything to me." The game was over. It was time for the truth. I made a few calls. The first was to my financial manager. The second was to the owner of the Grand Crest Hotel, an old friend. The third was to my lawyer. A plan was set in motion. Ben and Clara were told to trust me and to keep quiet. The wedding was in 2 weeks. Evelyn was now planning a smaller, more appropriate event at her club, one she could control. She thought she had won. She had no idea she was about to lose everything. A week before the wedding, I asked for a final meeting with Robert and Evelyn. We met at a quiet cafe. I arrived first, dressed in my usual old clothes. They swept in, looking sympathetic. "David," Evelyn began, "we know this is hard, but some things just aren't meant to be." I stirred my coffee. "The wedding is back on, at the Grand Crest, everything as Ben and Clara wanted." Robert laughed. "With what money? Your life savings?" I looked him in the eye, my gentle demeanor gone. "No. With my money." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a brief financial summary. Robert picked it up, skeptical. Then his face went pale. His eyes darted from the paper to me and back again. This can't be right," he stammered. Evelyn snatched it from him. "What is it?" Her eyes scanned the document. The numbers there, my net worth, were more than they could ever dream of. Your DL Holdings," Robert whispered, naming my investment firm. I gave a small, cold smile. "The D stands for David." The color drained from Evelyn's face. "The car, the clothes, the house." "A test," I said simply. "And you failed. You judged a book by its cover. You treated my son and me with contempt because we didn't fit your idea of success." I leaned forward. "The wedding is happening, but you are no longer paying for it. In fact, you are no longer invited." They were speechless, utterly defeated. The man they thought was beneath them was, in reality, far above them. They had insulted the one person who could have opened doors for them. I stood up to leave. "I suggest you support your daughter from a distance. If you truly love her, you will accept her choices and the man she loves without your conditions." I walked out of the cafe, leaving them in stunned silence. I didn't feel happy. I felt a deep sadness that people could be so shallow. But I also felt relief. The truth was out. My son would marry the woman he loved without her family's poison. The wedding day arrived. It was held at the Grand Crest, more beautiful than Evelyn could have ever planned. Ben was glowing. Clara was radiant, having stood up to her parents. As I walked her down the aisle, a role she had asked me to take, I saw only love in her eyes. Her parents were not there. They had chosen their pride over their daughter. It was their loss. The ceremony was perfect, filled with genuine joy. At the reception, I gave my speech. I stood in a perfectly tailored suit, a different man from the one they had met. "Life teaches us that the truest wealth isn't in your bank account," I said, looking at Ben and Clara. "It's in the love you build and the character you show when no one is watching." The guests applauded. Later, the owner of the Grand Crest came to greet me as an old friend, cementing the reality of who I was. The rumor mill began to spin. A month after the wedding, Robert showed up at my real home, a beautiful modern estate, not the leaky house on Elm. He looked tired. "David," he said, "we were wrong, so wrong. Evelyn is shattered. We've lost our daughter." I let him in. "You didn't lose her," I said. "You pushed her away. You valued your social standing over her happiness." He nodded, unable to meet my eye. He asked for forgiveness. I told him that was Clara's decision to make, not mine. I encouraged Clara to have a conversation with her parents. She did, on her terms. She told them they needed to change, to let go of their obsession with status. It was a difficult talk, but it was a start. Ben and I supported her, but we stayed out of it. This was their journey to take. I had done my part. I had protected my family and exposed the truth. The rest was up to them. Months passed. Clara's parents made a real effort. They started therapy. They began volunteering, meeting people from all walks of life. They were trying to become better people, not for show, but for real. Clara slowly let them back in. One Sunday, they came over for a barbecue at my place. They were nervous, humble. They saw me not as a threat or a target, but as a man who loved their daughter. Robert helped me at the grill. "I still can't believe it," he said, shaking his head. "All that time. Why the act?" I flipped a burger. "I needed to know if you loved Clara for who she is or for the image she could project." Ben needed to know, too. A lifetime of condescension is a heavy burden. Robert was quiet. "I understand," he finally said. It was the first real conversation we ever had. Evelyn found me later. "I am so ashamed, David." Her apology was genuine. "I was taught that worth was about money and connections. I never questioned it until I lost everything that actually mattered." I accepted her apology. Holding a grudge would only continue the cycle of poison. We were family now, for better or worse. And family forgives. A year later, we all gathered for the birth of Ben and Clara's first child, a beautiful baby girl. In the hospital room, there were no social divisions. There was only joy. Evelyn held her granddaughter with tears in her eyes. Robert clapped Ben on the back, a real, proud smile on his face. The old wounds were healing, replaced by the new life in our arms. I held my granddaughter, her tiny hand gripping my finger. I thought about the strange journey that brought us here. My little act had caused so much trouble, but it had also led to so much healing. It forced everyone to look in the mirror. It broke a toxic cycle. My revenge wasn't wealth or exclusion. It was this moment, a united, loving family. I still live in my nice house, and I still sometimes wear my old flannel shirt to putter in the garden. The difference is, now everyone knows it's a choice, not a circumstance. My true wealth was always my freedom, the freedom to be myself without needing anyone's approval. That was the lesson I had wanted to teach all along. At my granddaughter's christening, Robert gave a speech. He talked about second chances and the danger of judgment. He looked at me and thanked me for my patience. The room was full of friends from all parts of our lives, old friends from the community center and new friends from the business world. It was a true reflection of our family, diverse, real, and bound by love. That evening I sat on my porch watching the sunset. Ben, Clara, and the baby had gone home. I felt a deep, profound peace. I had acted like a poor, naive father to test my daughter-in-law's family. It turned out that the test wasn't just for them. It was for all of us. It taught us about prejudice and forgiveness, about lies and truth. And in the end, it gave us the one thing money can never buy, a real family.